people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
To the mother relay, we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. In the first quarter of next year, in February, unbeaten two-division WBO champion of Denmark, Dina Thorslund is set to return to action opposite the ring. Argentina's own former WBO flyweight champion, Deborah Haney Lopez. This will be Deborah's first fight since having lost a decision to Tamara DeMarco, thereby losing the WBO title at flyweight. She has since made the decision to move up in weight, up approximately two divisions, past super flyweight up to bantamweight.
Seems that Deborah didn't have much interest in getting that WBO title back. I think Gabriela Alanis, hard-punching, unbeaten, newly crowned WBO champion Gabriela Alanis, has a lot to do with that. Deborah Lopez lost that WBO flyweight title to Tamara DeMarco, and Tamara lost the title to Gabriela Alanis. And Deborah Lopez, I wouldn't give her very good odds against Gabriela Alanis. There's not a lot of fighters at flyweight I'd give good odds against Gabriela. So, Deborah Lopez has decided to move up in weight, and she's going to be taking on Denmark's own hard-punching Dina Thorslund up there at bantamweight. You get the sense that maybe for Deborah, it got hard over time to continue to make the flyweight limit. And what she figures is that this will be a healthier weight for her, and that might show up in her performances. I mean, I'm just bouncing ideas around, trying to understand why she's moving all the way up to bantamweight. That she moved up in weight is seldom age. It happens all the time. She lost at one weight. She might want to try her luck at another, though she's jumping up 2 weight classes for this fight. It's ballsy.
And Dina Thorslund is no joke. She's no squirrely amateur. She is an unbeaten two-division champion, a year older than Deborah Haney Lopez. Deborah's 28, whereas
Dina's 29.
Neither fighter was all that active this past calendar year. Dina Thorslund only saw action once, and the same applies to Deborah Haney Lopez. The only fight she had was the Tamara DeMarco fight that she lost.
Both fighters only fought once this year. Dina Thorslund sports a professional record of 18 wins, no losses, and no draws with 7 knockouts.
To Deborah Haney Lopez's 20 wins with 1 loss, 1 draw, and just 1 knockout. Only 1 recorded knockout. Deborah Haney Lopez was never a knockout merchant. She's not a knockout merchant.
She wasn't a big puncher at flyweight. She's not going to be a big puncher up there at bantamweight.
It's not her style. Deborah Haney Lopez is your according to Hoyle pure boxer, sticking and moving and staying on the outside.
Economic and defensively responsible, defensively minded. Not what you would expect from an Argentinian fighter, as many Argentinian fighters are known to be sluggers, tough ones.
Whereas Deborah, she's more finesse than ferocity. She's a more cerebral fighter.
Based on this stylistic matchup and its dichotomy, Deborah would be the boxer and Dina would be the puncher, the one with the mean streak.
She's spiteful. It would have behooved Deborah Lopez to get a rebound fight in before this year was out. You know, she lost the DeMarco fight way back there in March. Plenty of time this year to not only get back in the winner's bracket with a rebound fight, but debut as a bantamweight before taking on someone as seasoned as Dina Thorslund. It seems a lot like Deborah Lopez squandered the time, squandered most of this year, and she's going to pay for that.
You need some time off, you take some time off, but what you don't do is try to rebound with somebody like Dina Thorslund.
That is not a rebound fight. You know, Deborah, she saw action 3 times last year, only once this year, whereas Dina had 2 fights last year and just 1 fight this year.
Set to kick off next year opposite the ring, the Argentinian fighter.
Fight set to go down at the Greyker Arena in Dina Thorslund's native Denmark. Dina will have home field advantage. She is the house fighter, thus, in the event of any close rounds that might be hard to score, hard for the judges, you can imagine who will get consideration. All Dina really has to do opposite the ring, Deborah Anna E. Lopez, is appear the busier fighter, because Deborah Lopez, she's going to be moving lateral, boxing off a back foot, and she don't throw that many punches anyway.
Dina really is more boxer-puncher than pressure fighter. She's not always barreling forward, swinging for the fences. She's better than that.
Bouncy, very in and out, athletic, capable, and strong. Though opposite the ring, a fighter who's likely to fight a negative fight, it behooves her.
She just needs to appear the busier fighter in the eyes of the judges, because in all likelihood, Deborah Anna E. Lopez is going to spend the majority of this fight on her bicycle.
She's not going to engage. Banging in the booth, in the pocket, that's not Deborah Anna E. Lopez's calling card. So all Dina has to do is appear the busier fighter.
Dina Thorslund, who is one of 4 champions in today's bantamweight division.
Reigning IBF champion Ebony Bridges of Australia, who just successfully defended her IBF title for the first time opposite the ring, her domestic rival Shannon O'Connell, and that highlight reel knockout.
WBC champion of Mexico, Yulihan Luna, and newly crowned WBA champion of the United Kingdom, Nina Hughes.
Obviously, WBO champion Dina Thorslund. Beyond this upcoming Deborah Anna E. Lopez fight, I would very much like to see Dina be a little bit more active next year, more productive, and opposite the ring, one of the 3 other champions at this weight. Let's hope that next year brings the bantamweight division some unification matches. Men's lightweight news ahead of his upcoming fight with Hector Garcia in the first quarter of next year. Gervonta Davis says, not sleeping or overlooking Garcia. You saw what he did to Chris Colbert, then unbeaten Chris Colbert, who is favored to win that fight. And let's be honest, we all know the promotion was behind Chris a lot more than it was behind Hector Garcia. The same applies here.
Hector Garcia will be climbing up a weight class to face Davis at 135 pounds.
El Androide will sport a 3.5-inch reach advantage and plenty of confidence heading into the clash. Garcia's sudden ascent is not lost on Davis. I'm definitely not sleeping on him or overlooking him. You saw what he did against Colbert, Davis said.
Yeah, but Chris Colbert and Gervonta Davis are very different fighters. You know, Chris Colbert at his best, he's more of a boxer than a puncher, a pure boxer.
And he kind of went against the grain, went against his instincts and what he's actually good at. Spending as much time in the pocket as he did with Hector Garcia is a big part of what costed Chris Colbert that fight and his unblemished record.
Chris is not a puncher, so why he made the decision to spend that much time in the phone booth with Hector, well, your guess is as good as mine. I guess he was trying to prove something, maybe put on a show.
It was one of those instances where it might have been better to win on your feet, win boring, than gamble. That gamble, it costed Chris. I know he's technical, he's got a little pop. I just want to put on a great performance. I'm going back and watching tape and studying him. I'm not a guy who overlooks my opponent just because social media says someone is trash or anything like that. I don't think he's trash. Davis said he's always been the kind of fighter who stays focused on the opponent in front of him and respects each foe as a threat in their own respect. Davis is coming off a 6th-round knockout win against Rolly Romero.
Hector Garcia has a deeper amateur background than Rolly Romero. I think Rolly had something like 20 amateur fights, whereas Hector's had something like, 200? Something like that.
And he's riding high. 2 signature victories, 2 signature wins in his last 2 contests. The upset win, the shock upset win over Chris Colbert, and the more recent title win against Roger Gutierrez, then reigning WBA super featherweight champion.
I've noticed a mean streak in Hector Garcia, fight by fight. He's an action guy.
He's a little taller than Gervonta, a little longer for what it's worth. Moving up in weight for him, it may not be the worst thing in the world.
He might feel invigorated not having to cut down that extra 5 pounds to make super featherweight, this fight being a lightweight contest at 135 as opposed to 130.
But like I said, I notice a mean streak in this guy. He's not an outside fighter, you know. He's more of a mid-range to inside guy.
Well schooled, good amateur background, a current reigning WBA super featherweight champion, all that jazz and all those bells and whistles.
But as stated, he's a guy with a mean streak, and he has the appearance of an action fighter, kind of guy that's going to open up on you and let punches go. And Gervonta Davis, being a heavy-handed counter-puncher to some extent he is.
That's what he's billed as.
I know it took him 12 rounds to knock out a one-legged Yuriorki Scamboa, and I know that he failed to knock out the very unheralded Isaac Cruz, a late replacement for Rolly Romero. I understand that, but Gervonta Davis's reputation and what he's billed as is a knockout merchant.
So we're going to go with that, and we're going to go ahead and give the edge in power to Gervonta.
On the premise that he is the stronger puncher of the two, he's a counter puncher. He waits for the other guy to make a mistake and capitalizes. Hits the guy with a shot that he don't see. And if Hector Garcia maintains that mean streak that I've been seeing fight by fight, he might get himself counted. He might get himself knocked out. He's a little taller than Gervonta and a little longer, and he needs to use that height, use that length to keep it long and loose and on the outside.
1 and 2 punches at a time and no more. Don't string shots together. Exhibit a little bit of poise.
Exhibit a little bit of patience. The key to dealing with a decent counterpuncher that has some power is limiting his countering opportunities and being defensively responsible.
Using a jab and altering the cadence of your punches, not throwing the same punch the same way every single time.
Is to not allow that counterpuncher to time you, figure you out, and your rhythm. For this fight, Hector, who's been exhibiting a mean streak, he really needs to be more the boxer than the puncher.
If he wants to shock the world, he does.
If he doesn't, and he gets himself knocked out, Gervonta Davis is saying that he wants 3 fights next year, with the third bout being either Shakur Stevenson or Devin Haney.
Sounds good.
Sounds great. This is all intended to be a prelude to a Ryan Garcia showdown. People are becoming more and more skeptical as to whether or not that fight will happen beyond this upcoming...
Beyond the Hector Garcia fight, the Ryan Garcia fight, and what, the Devin Haney showdown at the end of the year?
You know how people come out and say they want to fight someone? Them guys are saying that on Twitter, and y'all run with it. If they mean it, send a contract. Do that. Send a contract. Davis said in a Twitter Spaces conversation. I didn't ask for some of them guys. I never asked for one opponent, not one. I still don't ask for an opponent.
How the hell were those guys supposed to send you a contract when your then promoter instructed them to leave you alone?
Gervonta Davis only recently parted ways with Mayweather Promotions. Not that long ago, Floyd Mayweather quite publicly instructed both Shakur Stevenson and Devin Haney to leave Gervonta alone and let him do his own thing. So how the hell were they supposed to send you a contract? And aren't you supposed to be the big fish around here anyway? It should be you sending out the contracts.
Even if Gervonta Davis is rid of Mayweather Promotions, he's still boxing on Showtime, and I think he's boxing there exclusively. He's still more or less tied to Al Heyman.
When Gervonta Davis was pressed on who his desired third dance partner of the year would be, he said, I got 2 opponents in mind. When asked who, Davis said, you know who. When Shakur Stevenson and Haney were the 2 names that were suggested, Davis said, got it. Davis was also asked to rank the likes of Garcia, Haney, and Stevenson. He remained coy with his response. They cool, that's it. I don't rank anybody.
I don't buy into the notion that Gervonta Davis is in pursuit of either Devin Haney or Shakur Stevenson, because if he were, now that he's a promotional free agent, he would have to change his decorum in order to get in the ring with one of them, and that shouldn't be a problem since he's not with Mayweather anymore.
He's still with Al Heyman, though.
But whose career is it? Whose career exactly? Is it Al Heyman's boxing career or Gervonta's? If Gervonta wants those guys, he's got to do what he's got to do, irrespective of Al.
Irrespective of Showtime as a platform, ESPN, comparatively, is a much bigger network that brings more eyes to it. And Gervonta Davis opposite the ring, any one of them, Shakur or Devin, that does numbers.
If you want him, go get him. He's the undisputed champion, not you.
Unless you want to run it back with Isaac Cruz instead, or fight a lesser-known fighter in Frank Martin.
You're thinking about what Gervonta's going to do beyond the Ryan Garcia fight, assuming it even happens, assuming he even wins.
He says he wants Devin. When it comes to Devin, he said, if you want to fight, set it up after the Ryan Garcia fight and tell Devin Haney's dad to get off my dick. Be prepared. Make sure they keep running, because after these first 2, I'm coming straight at you.
Sounds good.
Sounds great. Let's see if he does. A lot must come to pass before it becomes about Gervonta Davis and Devin Haney.
His next fight will be against Lomachenko. We're working out the date and the site right now. Devin, win or lose, is going to be a big, big factor in the sport of boxing. He's a terrific young man, very, very good fighter. So I like the way he carries himself. I like the way he fights. And with Lomachenko, I mean, he's in with the master. So that'll be a very interesting fight.
More encouraging news out of the men's lightweight division, where Gervonta Davis is at least playing with the idea of sharing the ring with Devin Haney later on next year. According to Uncle Bob Arum, the Bob father, all systems are a go for Haney versus Lomachenko, and it's the funniest thing.
But a few days ago, you saw there might have been trouble in paradise in reference to this fight. Some comments from Devin Haney about them moving the date. I think they wanted to move it out to May, and he wanted to do it sometime around March.
He wants the fight sooner than later, in a nutshell, because he's a young man whose body is still growing, and I don't imagine it's getting easier to continue to make the lightweight limit of 135 pounds. Bob Arum very recently stated that they want to keep as many fights off pay-per-view as possible. They want to do this fight as a regular ESPN fight.
Bob Arum knows the climate. He knows the business. He's been around a long time, and there's a reason for that. He knows exactly what's going on, and he knows that now is not a good time.
The box office is not yielding the returns that it once used to. Not at this time, and now is a very bad time to bill several fights on pay-per-view. Thus, he wants to keep fights off pay-per-view as much as he can. And I'll tell you something, if they made this a pay-per-view, I would buy it. I would buy Devin Haney versus Vasyl Lomachenko at the box office. But if Bob wants to give us this fight as a regular ESPN fight,
Don't threaten me with a good time.
and it's this kind of thought process, this kind of thinking, that makes you look over at those PBC shows, those PBC box office fights, like Davis versus Garcia, which we just talked about.
You ask yourself, well, why should I pay $80 for Davis versus Garcia when Bob Arum wants to give me Lomachenko versus Haney as a regular ESPN fight?
And that's more or less what Bob Arum has been saying, that now's not a good time to put fights on pay-per-view. People ain't spending their money the same way that they used to for a variety of reasons. And if it turns out that Devin Haney versus Vasyl Lomachenko is a regular ESPN fight, that's going to leave a lot of people scratching their heads, asking themselves, well, why should we pay for Davis versus Garcia? Not that Davis versus Hector Garcia is a bad fight. It's not a bad fight, if I'm being honest.
But it's not a box office fight either. It's not a fight that anybody was waiting for, anybody was asking for. It's not.
It's decent, but it's also just a prelude to a fight, another fight, with another guy whose last name is Garcia, Ryan Garcia.
When it comes to that fight, I understand. That fight, that's a pay-per-view fight. That's what that is. But this one,
Not so much. And when you're getting fights like Stevenson versus Valdez on regular ESPN, when you're set to get fights like Haney versus Lomachenko on, once again, regular ESPN, you really have to ask yourself, is a fight like Gervonta Davis versus Hector Garcia value for money?
were any of those fights that he's had on pay-per-view value for money?
It's the reality of today's boxing landscape. What passes for a pay-per-view these days, well, it's indicative that the bar is a lot lower than what it used to be for what passes as a pay-per-view fight, a box office fight. But that doesn't mean that people are going to react today the same way they used to yesterday.
They're not stupid, and they're not going to shell out money in droves when they're getting a better fight on regular ESPN, the biggest sports network in the country.
Lomachenko versus Haney is by far and wide a better, more intriguing fight than Davis versus Hector Garcia.
Haney versus Camboso stood over 1 million views. What's this going to do?
We'll see.